Hi, everybody. It's Lawyer Lisa Muro, and I'm so pleased to have Dr. Lay Willoughby with me. And Dr. Willoughby features in the book World on Mute, and I thought she had a really deep emotional connection to what was going on system wide. And she had a quote that just hit me, and it was um, targeted. It's very difficult to have targeted exclusion. Was it exclusion, Dr. Willoughby, that you had said?
Rejection.
Targeted
Rejection.
rejection. Yeah. Um, and Dr. Willoughby was injured and lost her license for refusing the jab, possibly, but mostly also for speaking up and warning other people. And she only did so once. It was looked like it was online through the regulatory body that they removed the restriction on speech. And so you waited to speak up, and then you did, and you were persecuted for that. And so you're one of the titans in the book, and the book has a lot of titans, but um if you want to tell us a little bit about your story, and you don't have to go in too deep if it brings back some difficult memories, right? For people.
Um, well, thank you very much for arranging this talk. I feel quite humbled being alongside the other Titans because so many of them I have been following for such a long time and have gained a lot of wisdom from those individuals as well. So the book, I think you've done an amazing job to bring together such significant stories and of individuals who have tried to run up against all of the stuff that's happened over the last 5 years. So yeah, I am medically trained in the UK and came to New Zealand in 2016. I was trained as an anaesthetist, as you would say, anesthesiologist in
Yes.
America and Canada.
Yes.
Same thing, just a slightly different name. And I was the head of the Department of Anesthesia at our regional hospital here on the East Coast in Gisborne when the pandemic was sort of gearing up. And I went through that fully engaged, very committed I had already been involved in a lot of work to try and improve the safety and services within the hospital and was involved in some very serious matters as far as that was concerned when the pandemic sort of started. And I was trying to prepare a very old infrastructure alongside my colleagues for what might be, at the time was purported to be Armageddon. Um, and I kind of knew that when the vaccine came along, the vaccine was dubious. There was something not right. And I had a colleague, I talked about this in a couple of my interviews, a colleague who was saying, Lee, don't have this. It's not right. Tried to tell me about it. And I was just so embroiled in everything else. I didn't look at what he was talking about, and I should have done. And I have a science background. I did a full-blown medical doctorate in translational medicine. So I am fairly knowledgeable when it comes to the lining of the blood vessels and the inflammatory cascade and all of that. So I should have really made time for that, but I didn't. I got 2 injections in the June and I developed a very serious thrombotic complication in the August, which has been vigorously investigated more recently because initially they dismissed my diagnosis and discharged me the following day, having stopped my treatment. And unfortunately, I had a recurrence of that thrombotic complication in October last year. And so now there's been a recognition. Now that obviously I think doctors have been exposed to so much tragedy and bizarre diagnostic
Yes.
um, entities that they've never seen before, and in younger and younger people and in children,
Yes.
they know there's something not right. If they have no clue about what the cause is, they still know there's something not right. And when I presented a second time with exactly the same diagnosis, there was no difference. I think a lot of the doctors and the people that I encountered kind of thought, oh, hold on a minute, this is that was real.
Yes.
My incapacitation, like I I was treated, I was looked after by the staff that I usually work shoulder to shoulder with, and they couldn't quite make sense of why I would be in extremis. And then all of a sudden, I have it a second time, and then it kind of underlines the original event. So um, I actually think um, I want to. My conclusion about why that happened is that I think, and many people won't be ready for this, but I think that God showed me that that there was something really horrific going on by showing me in that first event. And then what he's done is he's taken me and shown the others. He's taken me as an example and shown them, actually, hold on a minute, guys, this is
Yes.
what's happening.
Yes.
So so I actually really genuinely feel that. And having been a completely a-religious person up to the just before the well, just after the event in August 2021. But um I, there's a force of evil that is unconscionable,
Yes.
that has surrounded this whole thing. And
Yes.
your book is, to my mind, summarizing some of the mechanisms that are at play that, I mean, many of us haven't even considered. I mean,
Right.
the level uh, of international orchestration and um, yeah, the depth of control and evil that is at play is uh, quite formidable. And it would be great if, I know the reason you've written the book is to make people see that and stand up against it. Because if we don't do that, then this world is going to become, well, hell on earth, basically.
Yeah. So for people who haven't read the book yet, there's a couple key concepts. And the first is that it's I I did pull beautiful individuals that I call Titans, my Titan Willoughby, from all around the world. And they're little bright lights that cued to me to see this not as Dr. Willoughby's fight, Jordan Peterson's fight, Dr. Trozzi's fight, right? Not to see it that way, but to see that this is one system. It is one globalist system. It is the court system of the globalists where we will be ruled by social credit. Because it's not the topics you can't discuss, right? The topics you can discuss. You can talk all you want about vaccines, but it's the position you take on it. You can talk all you want about the pandemic, but it's the position you take on it. And so I'm a big person. I'm detailed, but I'm also, at the top thinking um, on the bigger concepts. And in the legal area, which hopefully I'll have some legal titans on, uh, it will displace our courts. It will. And when they take us from our civil liberties, it displaces the nation state. We become regulated subjects. And once we're regulated subjects, we are a global citizen. And so I want people to think of this on the big level. And to do so, you need to read the book. And so, and that helps with this discussion.
I really think that um it explains so much of why people are constantly asking at the moment in New Zealand, why isn't justice being um, awarded to the people that are fighting for the freedoms that we, ordinarily think that are inalienable rights, and the judiciary is essentially failing to fight for the rights of the population. And now it makes so much sense because there's a deconstruction going on of the power of the judiciary in order to enable what you're describing, which
Right,
is this whole global regulatory, you'll be a regulatory subject of a global system. Yeah.
right, right. And I rewrote the book 3 times. Um, eh, because new insights kept thudding inside me, and they felt revelatory, and I would have to go back and I would have to find proof that this is what was happening. Because how I think is, if I see this dot and this dot and this dot and I line it up, I'm going to find the next one. So I knew what to look for in order to prove out the concept. And I saw that occupations, the minutest way to earn a living was being gathered, right? So we're all becoming regulated subjects. To a certain extent, the titans that we know about are in key areas. But this program is rolling out like a cookie cutter system. And so it's trans-occupational, it's transnational. And in every single time, they apply a speech committee. And I realized that the speech you can't have, behind it hides a pillar of the globalist state. And so um, I know we talked a bit about going into TEDx together on here, um,
Hmm.
and your reaction to it. Um, so TEDx is the health data space, the European health data space, and it's the T uh, European E, health, H, data, DA. They grabbed the first 2 letters, which is odd, and then space. And being dyslexic, sometimes I struggle. Um, I immediately scrambled that word to deaths. And I think they worked very hard with that an acronym to grab letters that you would never use D and A, the first 2 letters for your acronym. You would never use the T. So immediately I thought that was rather creepy. And it's it's where we're headed. And to the doctors who haven't spoken up, and to the nurses who haven't spoken up, and to the system, the hospital system that hasn't spoken up or is colluded. This is a really important chapter. And what it says is that we're being moved from the system that we know now in terms of health to a new system entirely. And the new system is to be governed permanently um, by AI. So, you're not healthy, you have a certain set of data. You're not sick, you just have a different set of data. And you're not dead, you have a different set of data. And for people to envision the operating system on it, what has the laws that back this up. All of the laws have been collated, and the OECD is moving in this direction, and they're monitoring where each country is in terms of moving to this interoperability. And you've got to envision that they want the technical interoperability, so the whole world AI system works, um, the semantic interoperability, so that everything is labeled the same, the the legal interoperability, so the requirements to comply with this are set in place. Um, so this is a very important part of AI in healthcare, and it does not have a doctor-patient relationship, and it does not even have face-to-face healthcare. It ends with a discretion to present face-to-face healthcare. So I wrote the book to warn people and to explain what it was that we're seeing. And Dr. Willoughby, I mean, it's very dark, it's very sobering. Um, but how did it resonate with you, and whether or not it explained anything that you were seeing, or, to
Well,
understand the system?
well, locally, it explains, if this, if this system is rolling ahead as you describe, and it's essentially, as with all the other things that the legal system, etc., it's deconstructing the current healthcare delivery modalities in order to achieve a total replacement of the sort of like the human delivery
Hmm.
of healthcare. That makes a lot of sense when I see at a regional level in our community, having worked at what we called originally the DHB, the District Health Board, um, for, I was there for close to 6 years. Obviously, I was in the UK as a consultant for 8 years prior to that, but in my New Zealand experience, we're in a very remote part of New Zealand. And so the regional hospital is extremely important because in order to get tertiary healthcare in a crisis or in a very serious health emergency or condition or dialysis even, um, you have to either fly or drive. So fly for 45 minutes to an hour or drive for 3 to 4 hours to get to the next centre.
Yeah,
And our hospital has been systematically driven into the dirt.
yeah,
Um, and the pandemic more recently has helped with that, but I have knowledge because I was in a leadership position prior to the pandemic that the state of the staffing, the recruitment, the whole spectrum of how the whole organization was performing was being systematically denigrated, so that recruitment was nigh on impossible. Um, I actually, before the pandemic, I took over, or during the beginning of the pandemic, it would have been, I took over our own recruitment process in order to get people in to our department to staff it. And that's a highly unusual thing to have to do in a hospital, which should have human resources, um, skilled human resources people, etc. This is all lip services being paid at the moment. In fact, actually, there is a bit of a local, well, there's a media interest in what's going on at our hospital um, because it's in such a state. Um, and they're trying to explain it away by saying that the incentives to come here are insufficient,
mm.
that
Yeah, I've heard that.
that people aren't paid enough. Um, but I actually do not agree with that. There is some much more, um, the culture of the organization and the way that the services are being systematically um, restrained from doing a good service and from, sort of ensuring a decent workforce. it's just been ongoing. And so you explaining that there's this agenda to remove healthcare explains almost, well, it would fully explain what's going on. Whether I'm sure that most people at the local level have no idea about it. They just would not know that this is what's happening.
Hmm.
Um, I also have
Well,
a,
before you go
there's
go
this
on,
con sorry, go
w-
on.
well, what about the jabs? Yeah, and like for what we have in Canada was very much that the medical staff got them first and got them repeatedly and got them most. And, in one province, it was very, they wanted to have the jabs removed. They couldn't staff their hospitals because of this restriction, requiring the jabs, and they weren't lifting them. And so when you see that there's a vision to replace the current system to an AI system, then it makes sense that they're the most injured, really, individuals. And they're towing the line for a system that doesn't want them. And quite literally, it could be by design that they get the first and the most jabs, the most boosters. It could be, my theory is it's by design because it gets us to that collapse of the healthcare system and we get the AI system in response. And simultaneously, you're seeing this push for, telehealth and, see your your doctor online or what have you. The process is in play in my view. And so
Yeah,
what's your reaction to
I
that?
think when I did a talk last year at a public event, and I talked about the targeted rejection that you mentioned earlier. But before I did any of that, I discussed the therapeutic relationship.
Hmm.
Now, the therapeutic relationship between two humans um, in a positive regard,
Hmm.
in a situation where the individual that's being asked to help is fully engaged and focused on the person that they're seeing
Yeah.
with the intent to make their life better,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, is one of the most powerful therapeutic interventions that you can have. So people engaging in a therapeutic discussion in its own right is healing.
Yeah.
And so, and we know that the biochemistry and the electrical entrainment that occurs between two humans when the other, not, I'm not talking about when there's animosity or toxicity or, those are obviously extremely damaging um, interactions between people, and, targeted rejection is the worst of them. But the therapeutic relationship, it cannot be understated. And so what this is doing, the system, the TADA system that you're describing, is removing that as an option. So, seeing someone one on one,
Yeah.
it, physically by that person means that you're going to remove our innate ability to connect with that person properly. I'm not saying that telehealth, I do a lot of telehealth
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I've got patients all over the country
Yeah.
who do sort of health, um, you know, functional medicine, that kind of thing. Um, but that is a huge, and people need to appreciate that. And I think people do. Those people who have experienced healthcare recently, I've spoken to so many who have been met at their general practice by whoever, whether it be a doctor or a nurse, with total lack of empathy,
Yeah.
total disregard, total arrogance, judgment, um, dismissive, saying that they're anxious. I mean, that's in the context of having been injected or not. It doesn't matter. Both groups
Mm-hmm.
are feeling that they've seen a shift in the way that practitioners are interacting, and that goes into a whole other area of the biochemical impact of the jab. So what they've done is they've not only injured a whole tranche of medical professionals,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they have they have altered their minds through the passage of the stuff through the blood-brain barrier
Yeah.
into the neurological space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, we know that we know that it goes there. We've seen the studies where the
Yeah.
spike proteins in the cells, the spike proteins gone the nanoparticles went everywhere. That was what it was designed for, to take it across the blood-brain barrier. And now we're seeing the functional expression of that, in that we're seeing people who have lost their ability to be empaths.
Yeah. That.
They've become robotic. They've become transactional. They've regressed into the protocolized recipe type medicine that doesn't
Mhm.
allow nuancing for individuals' needs.
And well, the
And
medicine's loaded now too with increased billing time, right? Like, what's the code for this? And they have to spend so much paperwork time, and I think that's non-accidental by making, the relationship with the workload so complex. You have less time for the individual. And I don't know if it's like this in New Zealand, but we have a lot of immigrants, a lot, and an overwhelming amount in a small amount of time. And it has another effect of overloading an already taxed healthcare system. Again, this can be by design. And I have on good authority that one of the big GTA sort of hospital systems, one of the persons running it said if it wasn't for euthanasia, we'd never get through it. And so that simultaneously, I know, simultaneously, when they're making it more complex, when they're overloading the healthcare system, they're adding this new, death care, healthcare by death care. And I have, you know, my own stories with it already, where I know people who have made those decisions. One was a 37-year-old man with no prospects. Another one, that this was a choice that he made. He wasn't even sick. And another one was an elderly woman, self-sufficient, had back pain and went in to discuss it with a doctor and came out with a euthanasia appointment. And so, these are very, very problematic. And it's the expediency. And once these types of legislations are in place, and my chapter on population activities goes into that more in depth. But once these systems are in place, there's almost an implication, that you should die. Don't be a burden before you become a burden. Choose this. And then, I looked at the system, and it has non-robust consent. So someone else can sign your consent to be euthanized
yes,
if you are unable, but unable isn't defined. So as a lawyer of 25 years, there's, you know, there's a problem. Unable could be, I'm in, I'm
Yeah.
indisposed, I'm in the toilet. Unable is I'm sleeping right now. Unable is what? What is unable? And the only restrictions that were really meaningful were that you couldn't be benefit in a will, but it enabled somebody who worked for the system so long as they weren't completing the euthanasia to do that consent. So that's a non-robust consent form, and now they're talking in Canada about increasing that to the mature minor. So your child could be given a devastating diagnosis, not able to comprehend it themselves, but be told, in the alternative is you can go see grandma tomorrow instead of going through all this pain you know, and that practitioner could say, well, that I thought they were a mature minor, and that be a valid consent, and the child dispatched without the you know, consent of the parent or even knowledge. So there's a real problem with the euthanasia system in Canada, and that by overloading the medical system, that they're choosing this dispatching. And I would like, if there's anyone doing FOIs, I want to know how these people are paid, because I want to know if they're incentivized to collect souls, right? If they get a bonus every time they dispatch someone, there's obviously the financial savings, but it's also a transforming of our medical system that is completely dehumanizing, right? Where, you know, instead of offering health care, you're dispatching death. And, you know, I came really, um, to see life in a different way throughout this pandemic. I couldn't learn about all of the details of the legislations and the laws around the world that were amassing without deciding that you really, in some way, you needed to love life. And I became very pro-life, and it may not be a popular thing, but I decided you couldn't both have a Chinese wall in your head where you worship in some way a death culture, and at the same time, love your own life, and that it was somewhat of a psychosis. And, when you look at the ugliness of what was done to us in the pandemic, um, and how dehumanizing that was, and that injuries were nothing, and we were gaslit and what have you, and those who spoke punished. And then seeing the euthanasia, it made me reject it altogether. It made me decide that I'm going to love life, and I'm going to uh, love it in a way that means I know what life is, and it's important to me. And so it helps me maneuver in this world, right? That right now. But yeah, I'm seeing in Canada the immigration in some ways uh, being part of the choice to push euthanasia in our systems. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Um,
you
I suspect that I I did hear some information, and I'm trying to reach back in my mind. My mind doesn't memorize stuff as well as it used to. But I got a sense that there is um a occult move. I mean, obviously they've done the same sort of legislation here about euthanasia,
yeah,
but I think that there is a sense from what I saw, and I won't quote it because I'm not certain about where it came from, but there is an occult organized sort of eff- um, effort, shall we say, to do away with those that are at at the end of their
yeah,
existence. And uh, I find it utterly abhorrent that another individual could potentially make that kind of decision for somebody. I don't think it's a decision. It's never been, my profession, is taking someone within a hair's breadth
Yes.
of death and bringing them back in a state which is intact and minimally as possible, um, violated, if you like.
Yeah.
Surgical injury is necessary at times, and making sure that that individual does comes to no harm during that episode is what I did for 26 years or whatever. Um, the euthanasia is to me abhorrent, and especially as I have two lenses on the world, I have my mainstream medicine, but also my health, functional medicine lens, which is actually there are a lot of people out there who are at death's door, who are so sick and suffering so much, but
Mm.
they've never been offered any alternative to the mainstream model.
Yeah.
And when that's all you've got, you can understand why people want to end their life. But that's because they never get offered the options. And there are so many options to try and help people exist in a better quality of life. And you know, assisted dying is not one of them.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
I
it's
think there's
just
remember the UK and the remdesivir and the combining with the morphine and lowering
yes,
the yeah lowering the respiratory rate of the elderly and was it Matt Hancock in the UK, and so many of our elderly died, and so that death culture started definitely on high gear within our own hospital systems during COVID, right? And the financial incentive to do so. So those financial incentives were within the hospital system. If you they tested positive, you got money. If you had to treat them, you got more money. If they had to
yes,
get put on a respiratory, if they died, you got the most. So there was that incentive within the hospital system to push through this death culture, this TEDUS. And um, I think the path to healthcare by AI
yeah,
requires a lot of murder in our system. And I think that's why we're seeing the pressurized versions to get there. And
yeah. There's one scary thing that I saw recently that now people will probably laugh at this, but they are, and they may well already be using it in some parts of the world, but I read something about that they had devised or they've developed robots that will do phlebotomy to take the pressure off the staff on the wards and in the labs and the hospitals who are taking blood off patients.
so
And
explain that to the audience of what phlebotomy is.
but phlebotomy is taking blood. It's just
Okay?
taking a blood
Phlebotomy.
sample.
Okay?
So it's not a treatment. It's literally just taking blood for the purposes of analysis. It's a skill that all doctors and nurses, or most nurses and all doctors should be capable of doing,
Yeah.
in order to gather information and investigate the cause of somebody's illness. Now, phlebotomists are humans, fortunately, that are
Yeah.
very highly skilled that will go
Yeah.
round the wards and collect blood in sort of shifts in order to keep that investigation process going without being limited by the availability of doctors or the shift patterns. Um, and what they've devised is a robot that will do phlebotomy. So that means that and it's deemed to be much more accurate than a human. Because I expect there will be a vein detection sort of imaging that will be part of the robot. So they will be able to visualize the veins immediately when maybe that equipment isn't necessarily available to all
Yeah.
humans are doing that job. But what my cynical self thought when I saw that was, that's interesting. So being able to insert a needle into a vein to remove blood is one thing.
Mm.
But once they can do that, they can
Oh.
literally give you a little bit of something at the end to help you with your symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
You get my meaning?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you would never
And
know.
there's
And you
there's
would
no
never
yeah,
know.
and there's no consciousness. Like there's no conscience. There's no
No,
conscience. There's no
no.
guilt. There's no
If you accept, like Elon's been going on about it, lots of people have been going on about the sentient being becoming sentient, sorry, not sentient, sentient. So
mm,
when AI develops a semblance of consciousness and starts making its own judgments and decisions, which I believe, if you talk to some people, it's already doing that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
then when that happens, then we become, well, we walk into the film Terminator in a
yeah,
in a that's the reality. We give over our control of these machines to the entity itself, or more likely, I would suggest it's to this orchestrated elite class that would decide that in this particular region there are too many people, and therefore we will engage Protocol I
yeah,
between date and that date,
yeah.
whilst the phlebotomy service is going on. The sky's the limit when you start thinking about that. It's very dark, very, very dark.
The
And
hospital system has gotten dark. Like even the amount of people dying because of being on a waiting list, right? In Canada, that's just skyrocketing. So you could decide, you could triage this waiting list. You could triage it to your problematic individuals. You could triage it in a way that grooms society in a direction. There was, this isn't part of the book, but there was, I guess, she was a Muslim woman and she was a nurse and she admitted on camera that she often refused to treat Jewish people. And so that's kind of a triaging of healthcare, right? Of some sort. But if you devised it system wise, I mean, that's just a bad individual making a bad decision. And that's just one person. But to the extent, if you start dehumanizing humanity, and we're seeing that dehumanization at scale. I have children and they had friends over, and one of them was discussing a game that they played, a Dungeons and Dragons game online, and one of the weapons you could have is to throw live babies at your opponent. And so here's 12-year-old girls, and they played this with their teacher. And I pulled back and I thought, throwing live babies, we're being taught not to love life at all.
Babylon,
It's
it's
Babylon.
Babylon.
And
Um,
Baphomet.
I agree. I before I was thinking something that you said triggered me to think about my daughter who is 14. I have two daughters. My youngest is 14, she is reading, well, she's a voracious reader. And
Yeah.
it's a struggle for me to stop her doing that because she's such a great intellect herself. It's hard to guide. But the sort of the young adult or the teenage genre
Yeah.
in reading at the moment is overwhelmingly about,
Dystopia.
yes, it's about children
Cannibalism.
children being habituated um to to trauma and death and
Desensitized to it.
yeah, struggle and hardship. And I've observed that she talks about stuff in a way that is, yeah, removed from it, sort
Detached.
of detached from it. Yeah.
Mm.
And that really, really concerns me. And we've had conversations about it. So what we try and do is we try and sort of point these things out. And she goes, "Oh, mum, stop it," kind of thing. And I'm like, "No, but honestly,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is a really, it seems that all the series of books, the book series that she's read recently have been about um, sort of also children that have been either traumatically removed or
Yes.
um,
Yes.
disenfranchised from their parents.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's removing the family unit,
Yes.
and, and that is a massive part of this is destroying the family. And I don't know whether you've come across Let Kids Be Kids, Penny Marie, who is a good friend of mine in New Zealand. Um, she is going head to head with the DEI and the trans entities that are going on in New Zealand. And I just can't thank her enough for the information that she's putting out to parents because she has realized that what's going on is this complete, it's like it's a war on the parent-child relationship.
She will have to read part 3 of my book because
I I have
she
sent her it twice and she's so busy that she hasn't even looked at my messages, but I'm sure she'll
she's
get to
going
it
to
eventually.
she will learn stuff that isn't out
Yeah.
there. She will learn stuff that isn't out there and that will empower her.
Yeah.
My daughter Sienna, um, she brought back her first chapter book, and I was such a big reader. And so I said, "Oh, this is so exciting. What is it? What is it?" And oh, Mom, it's about these cannibals, and they come to town and they teach the townspeople to sell their body parts to the cannibals. But the cannibals are the good guys because they're more environmentally friendly, and the townspeople have houses, and the houses take up too much of a ecological footprint, and so they're the bad guys. It was I. I just tore the book up. I went into the school and I marched over there and I said, why is this? And she said, well, oh, I guess it shouldn't be for that age group. Maybe it should be for the grade 7 or 8s. And I said, no, it shouldn't be for children. And there was a point where I didn't lean in at the schools because I trusted the schools.
Yeah.
And I, I had loved my teachers and I had so many good ones. And I come from a family of teachers. My mother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher, on my father's side. My aunt was a teacher and then became a vice principal, and she was a librarian. I had the best books. And I went through the bookshelf of the library, and it wasn't just that this book was bad. None of the classics were there. And
Yeah.
I very quickly saw just all the dystopia. And so then I started really digging in, and the kids were bringing home these books where one moon at the back was like a little bit scary, two moons was horror, three moons, and like you'd never get me to read it. And so I had kids that had to sleep. We have a couch in our room, but they'd have to sometimes sleep on our couch because of nightmares. And my son was 8, And he said, Mom, can you help me with this book report? And the kids had only two books to choose from. So the teacher knew. I said, sure, I'll help you with this book report. And the first story was about a little girl who got kidnapped to be somebody's slave. And he's 8. And I he said, Mom, you're supposed to write something nice about it, Mom. And I was like, this is a horrific book. In the book report. And she cries. And so it's annoying to this monster. And so she says, well, I never got a chance to say goodbye to my mom. And he says, fine, you can say goodbye. So but you have to come back. And I'm warning you, if you don't, something will happen. And this is about teaching kids consequences to the kidnapper. So she goes home and her mother won't, so happy to see her, and her mother won't let her out. And the monster turns her into a fish and she dies. And so, like, that was the first one. The second one was older kids kidnapping kids on the way home for school to eat them. And this one kid escapes, yes, by playing hide and go seek and making them count really long. And there's pictures, and they're crawling through skulls to get out, right? And I thought, oh my God, this is what they're giving our children. And that's when I really started to be a bit more open to um, like all our systems are subverted. All of them, they're subverted. The entire global system is subverted top to bottom. Um, and I started looking at the laws, and I started looking, in the DEI area. Um, and that's a big component of this because that's an area that speech is heavily curtailed, right? And it's becoming that you're getting arrested for hate speech for quoting the Bible. That's in the book. And
I
so what,
just saw your Substack about that. Yeah.
yeah. And so this whole system, I started gathering the information, and that's why I had to rewrite the book so many times because um, I started to distill it in a different manner. So one, this is the court system, this regulatory regime that you were put through. That's the court system, right? It's social credit. The social credit's DEI. The social credit's going to work with CBDC, right? And it's a global system. If we don't look at this global speech architecture, we can't win the other things. And so that's why I understood that if we break, if we succeed, it's because we break this system first. Because once we have the ability to dialogue what's going on, name it as we see it, we can come up with the solutions, right? I might be like a big person thinker and can dialogue this stuff with you. You and I can dialogue it. Another person can take that information and they're a system architecture person and they go, okay, yeah, I know what to do, right? So we have the Trump administration, being a free speech administration. And if they start looking at these regulatory bodies as the globalists, right? Because another area of the speech that you cannot have is to be pro-nation state, right? You can't be pro-nation state. You can't be pro-rights because the system has to transfer, right? And then, the other aspect of it that's in the book is that areas that aren't regulated, right? That can't be an occupation or a profession. They can't put this little noose on them for speech. They're just attacking that profession altogether. So why did all the small businesses in COVID get killed systematically, right? Because if you're independently wealthy, if you're a small business, you have the ability to withstand and you can speak. As long as we speak, we can convey the alternative viewpoint and prevail because ultimately good and evil, right? They're trying to take away the voice of good and they're trying to
Mm.
systemize the evil. And I'll tell you another thing that I've formulated and I've become quite close to God. I think the Antichrist is actually the system itself. I think it's the AI permanent noose on humanity. And I think it's very, very far ahead in the smart city and based on reading the laws that I've read, um, that is our battle. And that's just something I'm formulating and I'm not really there yet. And hopefully I'll speak to some people who are more they're theologists or, they have a greater,
You
insight
should
into that area.
you should speak to my husband because he'll be able to tell you who it is.
Yeah. Well, I will speak to your
And
husband.
it's not a subject for today, I don't
Yeah,
think, because
probably.
it might be a bad idea to
Sure.
declare who that is. Yeah. Mm.
Okay. I will speak to your husband. Um, so
He's a Bible scholar, so like I know as much as I do because of him, and he is just a dedicated warrior of truth and wants to know what
yeah,
the scripture meant,
yeah, yeah.
what's God's law is, and how we achieve that, how we walk in God's ways, to because that's the only thing in his view and my view now that could protect us from what's coming.
Well, in my part three, I go through the reason why Christians are persecuted. And so
Yeah,
he'll be interested in that and, might be a follow-up conversation, especially with a Bible scholar. That's a really important, knowledgeable area. God leads us, though. I really believe that. He inspires us. And like I have always thought of that accident that I had as a blessing. And right from day one, I always conceived of it as a blessing. And yet it was this like injury to my body. And, then you said in some ways your own injury was a blessing because it was a form of speech that you probably couldn't have yourself that would work to convince your colleagues, but it was a form of speech that they themselves could then understand. And I guess I want to leave the discussion because we've had such a great discussion with the idea that we do need to wake up our fellow doctors or nurses, people in this profession. And I think the way to do so is through what the first part on medical shows and where it goes. And it goes to this concept of TEDS. And I think it will resonate for anyone who isn't completely co-opted or are part of it. Few people in my mind are actually understand this whole big program that is articulated in the book. And by that, I don't mean us in the freedom movement because maybe there are some, but I've even had people in the freedom movement say, until you told me, I didn't see it. But I mean the people working in this. I think they get a little tiny part, a little tiny part that they have to do. They get paid really well, and it's only that little thing, right? It's only that little thing, whether they're triaging people according to DEI, whether they're doing, any absurd evil thing, but it's just this little tiny thing.
yeah,
Um, and they don't know or see the big system or understand it. And I think that is true at every level. I think that's true in every system subversion. Like that librarian I spoke to, she said, "Oh, well, I can't, it comes on a list, the books that are approved. I can't be expected to read all these books." And I thought to myself, but you're a librarian. You know, where are the books that give children hope? And,
Yeah.
where are the books that say, and if I work really hard, I've got, this is my compensation, like this, I've achieved this, or there's nothing that makes them want to invest in themselves, their community, their family. Um, and I guess the book tries to put all that together. That's in the DEI section and the woke ideology section. Um, but I'm hoping, what are your ideas to try to get people in your area closer to TEDS and understanding it? I guess we could circulate our discussion.
Yeah, well, I'll be if I can send this discussion to people, that I think that would be the start. I've already sort of sent out the original things that you sent me to my sort of colleagues who are, well, not colleagues, medical professionals, but people that the salt of the earth people that I've met since this all happened. I count now, my friends are a very diverse group of people who to to some extent realized what was going on. So the freedom community, the people that know that we're all being herded into 15-minute cities. And there's a group on the East Coast here. I mean, the East Coast here and the South Island, I believe, of New Zealand is earmarked for rewilding.
Yeah,
But they don't want people on the East Coast.
yeah.
And that's another reason why they're deconstructing the health system here, because if there's no health system, then people won't want to move here. And that's
Mhm.
another way of stopping that. But all of those people will be wide open for your evaluation of what's going on. And I hope that they take the time to read it. And, we have meetings locally, and I'll speak to them about it then.
Yeah.
And just like I did with all my patients when I didn't stay silent for those 2 years. I spoke to every single person that came in my office about the injections and warned
Yeah.
them not to get any more. Um, I was just very fortunate that, you know, all of them, without exception, presumably, took that on board and realized I was doing that out of love and regard for them so that they didn't go ahead and get any more, or didn't have them at all. And many people that sought me out had
Good.
already decided they didn't want them. But so I think all of those people are, I suppose they're the converted, but I also have some friends in medicine who I will send it to as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all documented meticulously in the book, and they can review it.
Yeah,
And the other thing is, any medical professional listen to this should also read the last chapter. I know it's a 400 or 500, depending on the version book, page book, 484 to 523 page book. But the last chapter deals with what other powers these regulatory bodies have given themselves. And that is really important, in short order, actually, to try to warn every everybody, um, across the planet,
yeah,
um, because they have powers that I haven't seen in a long time. To do, they have carte blanche powers, powers on demand that they can award themselves and give themselves. And I'm a
mm,
lawyer. I read the legislation and I cried. Like I wept. So. I really want people to read the book because, I could have hidden with all this information, and instead I decided that it was important enough to share with everybody. And I really want people to pivot with it because everybody's flailing around, why don't we have this result or that result? And why can't we stop, this bad election or that bad election? Or why can't the system is explained so you know what you have to take down to win? And I think we have a window of opportunity to do so. And I want to do so. I want to.
Yeah.
I want to. Yeah. So, thank you, Dr. Willoughby. And I'm going to stop recording. And thank you, everybody, for listening, sharing. Give me a good review. It's $8 to get the Kindle. Buy the book, share the book. I really, really appreciate it. You can find me at lawyerlisa.substack.com. And I want for all the people who think that they like the speakers who are being censored to be continue to be censored. And they think they're on the other side of it and they like this censorship. It's the power structure that's being assembled that should be examined. The power structure, because once perfected, it will cross everyone's toes. Doesn't matter if you're trans identified, you're queer, whatever area that you think you hold this new protected status under DI. I want you to read the book and understand what's being assembled. Because the warning is for everybody. Like it's for everybody.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
Bye bye.
Thanks,
And
Lisa.
I am going to try to stop recording. Ah, there it is.